So my first example is that I have created a function where I am extending display remove. So we have the display library. Let me bring up the window here. Sorry. There it is. We have the display library. It's got all these functions. That is not the display library. That's a display object. There it is. So display, new circle. We use these things all the time. New circle, new container, and display remove, which is the one that I want to extend. So I have this problem in my code where I wanted to replace the functionality of display remove while retaining what it did, but I wanted to do some extra stuff. So all I did was I wrote a Lua script that at the top it created a new field in the display library called underbar remove. Can you read this code okay? Do I need to make it bigger?
No, it looks good.
Okay, and so what it did is it basically assigns the value of display remove, which is just like a pointer or a reference to the function, and it copies it into this field. So now, if I wanted to, I could literally say...
It's kind of a deep copy sort of thing?
Sorry?
Is it like a...
Literally, what's in this... Okay, when Corona starts up, what it does is it exposes display as a global variable, and attached to it, it's basically a table.
Mm-hmm.
And attached to this table are a bunch of fields, remove, new rect, new image rect, and all of them, all they've got in them is a reference to a function. If you were to literally say, let's do this. Let's just do this and demonstrate it instead of talking about it.
I guess my point was, though, that it's copying all the functionality of that.
What it's doing is it's copying a pointer. I say pointer because I think in C, but a reference to the function. So let me just demonstrate what's in there. So if we print display remove, if we run this piece of code right here on line 13, and I run this, here's what you're going to see printed out on the console. Function and some number. And so later on, when we reference display remove, I cannot type. You know, this is the thing that always goes wrong when I'm doing demo on the show. I can't type to save my life. Display remove. What we're doing here is Lua says, okay, this is a field, it's a function, where is it? And it goes to this location right here, and it executes that code that it finds there. So if I want to replace this, first what I need to do, undo my changes. The first thing I need to do is make a copy of that so I don't lose track of it. It's sort of like when you're sorting, you're doing like a sort algorithm and you're swapping A and B. Well, you got to keep track of one while you replace the other. And I'm waving my hands around like you can see me. The point here is if I could just simply do this and replace it with my own function, I would totally lose the reference to the original remove. It'd be gone from then on. The user would never be able to call it again. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating a temporary, or not a temporary, I'm creating an additional field on the display library called underbar remove, because I know that there's no functions that start with an underbar. And if I'm really worried, I could do this. Underbar, underbar, underbar. Or, you know, give it some kind of special naming convention so that I know in the future, if Corona changes, there'll be no conflict.
When I take over a native function call, I usually just put a 0 at the end of it. So it'd be display.remove 0. That's just me personally. But that could bite me. Who knows? That could bite me someday.
Do this.
Now, Ed,
yeah.
Just to help clarify this, then below that in your code, you have the object dot underscore underscore destroyed and underscore underscore autoclean. That's 2 underscores there instead of just 1, right?
Yeah. My code. This code.
You're just expanding upon what you've just said. That by adding the underscore to there, you've got that stored in a secondary place.
Yeah. The point of doing the underscores or the remove 0 is you want to make sure if you're going to do something like this, you're going to add a field to an existing library, or you're going to add a function to an existing library, you want to make sure that in the future, it works today, great, and then you update to the next version of Corona, and they've added. So if I did something stupid like this, let's say I said my remove or old remove, and then for some reason Corona decided, let's add a function called old remove. Well, you just wiped it out, right? So the point of this weird naming business is to ensure that in the future my code is future-proof. It's not going to destroy some functionality in Corona, and then I'll have a mysterious failure to work. I'll be like, why doesn't it work? Well, because I overwrote it. So back to extending. What are we trying to do here? I'm trying to make a change to an existing function, which is display remove. I want it to do some extra things and everything it used to do. So the first thing I do is I create a temporary place, not a temporary place. I keep saying temporary. I create an alternative location to store the reference to the function. I copy it. That's the very first thing I do. And the next thing I do is I simply say display remove the current name, and I assign it a function. And I know that if I look at the reference documentation in this case, let me find it. If I look at it, it takes a single object reference. So the signature of this is it takes in an object reference, and that's it. So I got to duplicate that. So I duplicate that, takes a single object reference. I'm going to take out my extra code here. And then I do some little bits here. This is really unnecessary, but what I check for is I check to see if there's anything in here at all. Actually, it's not. So if they pass in a nil, I return immediately and I do nothing. Or if my flag destroyed is set, I do nothing. And so what I'm doing in my extension here is I'm removing the object, and then I'm setting a flag I use elsewhere in SSK to keep track of some details. And this flag is simply says, hey, you destroyed this already. You don't need to do anything with it. So if I put my old code back here, this old code, the auto cleaning code, the stuff we're not going to look at, you can look at it, download SSK and take a peek. It does a lot of elaborate stuff. And one of the things it does is it looks for this flag to see if it needs to do the things that it's trying to do. So once it's been set, nothing more needs to be done. So in a nutshell, create a place to copy the function pointer if you're replacing a function, and then make your own version of the function, and then within the function, call the old one by simply referencing it. You'll notice that it says display underbar remove. So we're calling the thing that is stored here, which is actually the old remove. So we're doing the removal just like we used to. And then I extended it. I did something different. In this case, I set a flag, and I was done. Another extension that I made in SSK is, like I said earlier, I play a little loose and fast sometimes when I'm doing my coding. And I always run into a bit of a problem with my Enterframe listeners and other runtime-based listeners. So one thing I like to do is I like to verify that the object that I'm about to manipulate still exists. The display object has not been removed previously. And there was no function at the time that I was doing it to verify that. So I simply added a new function called isValid that takes an object pointer, and I attached it to the display group, or the display library. So later I could simply say display, and if I had a object called Bob, then I'd say isValid Bob. And it would look at Bob, and the first thing it would do is say, did you pass in a nil? So is it nil? Is it not set at all? Okay, that's not good. That's false. So it returns false. But if it exists, it checks to see, is it marked as destroyed? If it's marked as destroyed, then it is in fact valid, and it returns true. Well, it has to not be nil, it has to not be marked as destroyed, and the function remove self has to exist. It's a little excessive, but it's like all these things I like to check for, because I know that if any one of these is false, so if remove self is not set on the object, that means it's been destroyed. If my flag is set to true, that means it's been destroyed. And if they pass in a nil, that means it definitely has been destroyed or it's invalid. Go no further. So, but the point is I simply added a new function to the display library because I needed it, and it was that easy. So I require this file, which is the one we were just looking at, display. Run it one time. Go ahead.
And if I could just point out real quickly, something that beginning students or people that are brand new to using Corona, there's a comment somewhere in the documentation that talks about being able to associate a function with a table. And that's basically what is being done here, is that we've got the display object and we're giving it a table assignment, the dot is valid or the dot remove. And this would be an example of a table or a function assigned to a table object. So
right.
in case somebody's new to this and they've wondered about that, these are excellent examples of functions being assigned to a table object.
Right.
Yes.
People think of tables like this.
Yes.
This
but is also a table.
Yeah, this
and I realize that's just a little off topic of what you're doing, but it is an excellent example of using or assigning a function to a table object.
Yeah, I use it all the time. In fact,
yes.
This is basically what you're doing when you create your own personal modules. You create a table at the top, you add a bunch of fields for keeping track of data, you add some fields that point to functions, that is, you do exactly what I did right here. And then at the very end of the file, the module file, you return the table. So if we forget about all this at the top, and we did bill, so we return our module bill. Bill now has entry 1 is set to 100, and it's got a function on it called do it. We just created a bill module. Mission accomplished. So you did get a little far off topic there, but that's fine.
Well, hopefully it'll clarify something in case somebody's ever wondered about that particular.
Yeah, and that's definitely worth pointing out because just as Ed sort of demonstrated, we kind of spelled it out. But if you're not accustomed to that, it's just sort of hidden, right? I mean, that's why every programming language has shortcuts and has nuances to it, and unless you know those things, then you don't see it right away. So it's worth spelling out. That's why, like, anytime I hate seeing. I know that every program has shortcuts, and I kind of hate to see them used. I know why people are using them, but I hate to see them used almost because it's almost like a secret club, like a secret handshake kind of thing, right? If you do it, you can all do it in this one line of code. And you're like, yeah, but the 3 lines of code that took weren't that bad at all, either. So why not make it a little more user friendly?